Hello, everyone, and I wish you a happy Friday. We have some trivia questions to ask, and these trivia questions are kind of geared toward seniors, those who were either in their teens or a younger adult in the 1960s. So if that's you, you may be able to answer most of these. Some of them are impossible to answer. I looked through them and I had no clue. I had to look them up, Google them, but here we go. We're going to start off with the first question is based in the 1960s. Which group had the #1 hit song, Soldier Boy? Soldier Boy for the 1960s was sung by what group? I'll give you a moment to think about it. Some of you already know, but it is the Shirelles, and that's who that was back in the 1960s. Another song in the 1960s came off a James Bond movie, and it was sung by the singer Lulu. If you know which theme song from what James Bond film, which is also the title of the film, can you think about that right now? Who or what was the song sung by Lulu, a James Bond theme song or title song? And think about which ones there are. But this one happens to be The Man with the Golden Gun. The Man with the Golden Gun. Here's another one. And I should know these things because I grew up, and these were also in the 70s here. Which member of the singing group, The Monkees, came from Houston, Texas? Which member of the Monkees is from Houston, Texas? And if you don't know, it was Mike, and his last name was Nesmith. So Mike was the member of the Monkees from Houston, Texas. Here's one a little more recent. Which politician? He was the president at one era in our history. He said these words, "Read my lips, no new taxes." Which president was that? And so I'm thinking most everybody already got that one. It's George H. Bush. That would be the first George Bush. Here's one going back to 1989, and we're all kind of grown up in 1989, I believe. I was a young man, and I remember this well. Which tanker, it's an oil tanker, caused a massive oil spill in Alaska in 1989? Which tanker caused a massive oil spill in 1989? Who was that? Or which tanker was that? Now, if you guessed the Exxon Valdez, you got it right. Now, if you like musicals, here's one for you. Which musical featured the song Food, Glorious Food? And let me give you a hint. It was sung by children. A musical, Food, Glorious Food. And I remember this from my childhood, watching this musical, and it was entitled Oliver, or Oliver Twist. So, from the book Oliver Twist, but it was Oliver. Here's another one for you song lovers. From Charlie Rich's classic song, "The Most Beautiful Girl in the World." Think about that song for a moment. What was the first word of the song? The most beautiful girl in the world. And if you answered, "Hey," you are correct. Here's one, changing gears here. In what decade did the prison Alcatraz close? It's an island off of San Francisco. I've seen it before. Water there is ice cold. But what decade did that prison close? Was it the 60s, 70s, 80s, or the 90s? If you guessed the 1960s, you are correct. Who married fellow country star George Jones in 1969? Who married the country star George Jones in 1969? 1969. I'm sure a lot of you came up with it right away. A bunch of you country music fans, that was Tammy Wynette. Now, we're going to fast forward here. This one is perhaps in the 80s and 90s. Now, who was the first female singing artist to register 30 top 10 hits? Now, this is one I should know, but it was Madonna. So if you guessed Madonna, you were right. Now, that was in the 90s, 80s, 90s. Let's go back to the a different decade. I'm not sure when this was, 60s or 70s. At which Los Angeles hotel was Bobby Kennedy shot? At which Los Angeles hotel was Bobby Kennedy shot? And the answer, if you haven't got it yet, was the Ambassador Hotel. Here's one from 1990. And some of us can remember this. In 1990, who got married to Jerry Hall? And Jerry Hall was a woman, by the way. Jerry Hall married Mick Jagger in 1990. Now, if you like the Jacksons, you know, we're talking about Michael Jackson, remember they had the Jackson 5. There are more Jacksons than the 5. How many Jackson children were there total? And the answer to that question is 9. There were 9. And Janet Jackson was the youngest of all the Jacksons. All right, let's move on to another page here. Let's see. It looks like I printed out the same ones twice. Here we go. Demi Moore married which Bruce? Was it Bruce Willis, perhaps? And that's who that was. Here's one, if you are a history buff. What was President Dwight Eisenhower's middle name? Dwight Eisenhower had a middle name, Dwight D. Eisenhower. The D was for David, if you didn't know that already. I didn't know. All right. Here's some stars. I want you to guess which roles they played in. Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan have both played what character? Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan have both played this character. Let me give you a hint. Sean Connery also played this character. And that probably clued a lot of you in to James Bond. Which motor company topped the Fortune 500 list in 1990? Which motor company? This is a U.S. motor company, and typically you would think you have 3 choices. And I'll tell you, it is General Motors, if you're wondering. Now we go back in time. Maybe you saw some of these in your childhood, some reruns. But what was the name of Tom Mix's horse? Tom Mix, I believe, was a cowboy from the silent movie days, and then he went into where they had voice that was, you could hear it on the film. But Tom Mix was a cowboy from the early part of the last century. His horse's name was Tony. I would not have known. All right. The movie Twister was a disaster movie, but what was it about? Which disaster? And if you guessed tornadoes, it should be the obvious one. You were right. What type of skirt was made famous as a fashion style in the 1960s? What type of skirt? In the 50s, we had the poodle skirt, but in the 60s, a skirt was made famous, and it was the mini skirts. There's a famous highway in Alaska, and using the word terminus, what is the terminus of the Alaskan highway? That means where it stops, it runs out and stops. If you look at Interstate 16, if you're going south on I-16, you pick it up in Macon, its terminus is Savannah, Georgia. The Alaskan highway has a terminus if you're going north from Anchorage, and it terminates into the city of Fairbanks. And if you didn't know that, now you do. How was the actress Angelina Brown, or Angeline Brown, how is she better known? And she's an actress, but her real name, actually her real name was Angeline Brown, but her stage name or her movie name was Angie Dickinson. If you didn't know that. Which state, going back to the Mayberry series, which state was Mayberry located in? Some of you got it right away, North Carolina. And you're looking at the city of Mayberry, the town of Mayberry. How far was Mayberry from the city of Mount Pilot? Now, Mount Pilot is one they always talk about. That's the bigger city they all went to. Didn't see much about Pilot in the series, but you always heard them talk about it. And it was exactly 60 miles from Mayberry. Here's a good one. On the Mayberry trivia, name two of Andy's girlfriends. You know, he had a lot of girlfriends throughout the series. I'm not sure how many there were, but if you can name two, and I can tell you two right now. One was Helen Crump, and her occupation was a teacher. And then there was Ellie Walker, and she was the new druggist or pharmacist. Now that we're on some Mayberry trivia right now, let's see, what's our time here? We're looking at 13 minutes. We're going to close this right now and maybe continue it next week. And then we'll upload another. And I think the next week's trivia will focus specifically on Mayberry. So I hope you liked that. It was good being able to talk to everybody today, and we're looking forward to the day we could all come back here and maybe do this in person. And I've done this once here with our group, and it's always an exciting time when we break it up and there's prizes and people are trying to guess. And I'm really impressed with how many people can guess every single question. And that certainly isn't me, but I'm impressed with them just the same. I wish you God's best and I hope you have a great weekend.